after she got, yeah, up until we were,
So maybe that was her assigned thing.
but she worked out even after you were born, and you was.
Maybe that satisfied her more when she didn't have kids of her own. She'd already raised kids.
Because we were talking about that at the end, and I said, well, you raised me, now it's my turn to take care of you. You know, when I was there, and that seemed to...
But she shrunk on her job. If she raised you, she quit too early, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
Oh, in Clovis?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it is.
James and Wilma sent that to me. But it's very, very simple.
1959.
Wilma wrote a little note. Don't know why they didn't put the birth date, she said.
I don't either.
Well, that one out there didn't have a birthday.
No.
Probably because it was in 1959. They didn't necessarily do it then.
I don't guess anyone
But
did.
Grandpa died shortly after that, 69. Our grandpa, Grisham. He was half everything.
Yeah, but his wasn't dated for years. We fussed and we fussed and we fussed and we done a little of everything to get that on there. Maybe his was.
Well, Grandma died
No.
before that.
Yeah.
And her birthday's on there.
Yes, but they
Well, I'm sure you
got the stone for her. Her birthday was put on. But we had his name was put on there and his date wasn't put on. And you have to really work to get anybody to go out and do it after that.
That came out pretty fast for
Yeah, it's got better.
some other people.
Claire got one of mine. They didn't. I was just trying to think, what about Mother? You know, as I was telling Joanne, I guess, last night, I said, you know, I wasn't with the older kids near as long as most kids are together. I think 13, probably 13 years old when Needy was working out more than she was at home. But I remember one time, and this was before she started going with your dad. But our dad used to be up at baseball games, just played over the community. And Marvin and I wanted to go. Yeah. Marvin and I wanted to go to the baseball game. And we didn't want to walk, it was hot. And this, I don't know who this man was that came to get her, to take her to the baseball game. But I wanted to go. So Marvin and I said, Marvin, let's go ask him if we can ride in the back. He was in a pickup. So we finally got brave enough to ask if we could ride. And of course, Needy was upset with us, but if we was going to ride in the back, why, it wasn't too bad. So we rode in the back. And another thing I remember about her, Pop bought a beautiful pair of mules. And one of them wouldn't even let Pop get in the barn with him. But Needy could go to the barn and harness the mule and hook up the mules, and she was the one that done the plowing with that set of mules. And cultivating and everything. That was her mule. He couldn't do anything with that one. He had to sell him. His name was Toby. He was a pretty mule. And I always remembered her being such even-tempered. Never complained.
So personality didn't change through the years.
No.
Always wondered if Dad had changed her personality in him.
He was always so sweet. He was always like that. From the time I remember, you know, the other kids would get upset with you or mad at you, but not me. She was just the same all the way, like my mother. And I think Rita was a lot like that. That's what the kids said about her. And I think she was. I think she was really, they were the same personality like our mother was. Very, very loving sister.
And you got a lot of that personality, didn't you?
Me? I don't know. I think mine is kind of mixed.
Well, was kind of making a face over there. I don't know that she agrees with
I
that.
can get upset. And women knows that. And I think I lose my cool more than my mother or my sister. I think Ines and I, but Ines grew more and more like that. The older she got, the more she. And I really noticed it after Edmund died.
You mean she grew more even?
But see, after I was 13, why I didn't go to Ines. Didn't. One year I remember my grandpa going off. Us kids had a hard time keeping shoes, you know, but that many of us. And Grandpa went off to a, I don't know what kind of a sale it was, and he brought us back in that era time, high-top shoes with heels on them and buttoned down the front. And all of us, Sis, me, Ines, and me. And there I was, just 13 years old, in loosely shoes. And I had to wear them to school. And they did too, that winter. And Sis cut hers off. She made the Ines and Nita wore theirs, and I did too. And that was the last year that we all went to school together.
Which would have been what grade for Mother?
Well, she must have been in the 8th.
So her last year of school would have been 8th grade.
And Ines must have been in the 6th or 7th. And no, that's the last year of school. Because, and
I thought you told me you took those shoes off.
I couldn't. It was winter time.
You wanted to.
I'm sure.
Those long stockings?
Long, high top
shoes that Grandpa
With
had
heels.
with heels on and buttoned down the front.
You
Some
had
of,
the kind
some
you had
of
to
them
have
were-
a hook to button.
some of them was buttoned, some of them was string.
Well, I don't remember high-top shoes, but I remember we're having to wear those long stockings.
Oh, yeah, we had to do that.
Us
but I
kids
used
would get down,
roll them
Raven
down.
and I, we'd go down the road away from the house, and then we'd roll them down below
I
our
think
knees.
they all got like that, and I saw a picture of us in school not too long ago, a picture of school kids, and they all had their socks rolled down.
Yeah, you forgot to roll yours back up for
Yeah, and then
the
you
picture.
roll it up before you got home. And then one of the place before that, on this place that Lorena was born, we had a pony, and they'd take turns of riding the pony to school, and the one that rode the pony come home early. Anita got to do that a lot. Ride the pony home early. As soon as you got out of school, you beat all the rest of the kids home so you could herd the cows. We didn't have a fence in a certain place, and you had to herd the cows. The pony let the cows out in this pasture and herd the cows. One time, the kids used to have tendency, because Nitty was so even-tempered, that they would, this was that same year, I guess, they thought, oh, we're going to tease her. Mom was gone somewhere, and I don't remember where she was gone. But Dennis was in on that. Dennis and Sis, and I don't know who all, and Blackford Face. And
All ganged up on Needy.
All ganged up on Needy because they thought she was the pet that day for some reason. They all ganged up on her.
ride the horse, maybe.
And blacked her face with stove blackening. Now, you know how hard that was to get off. I mean, it was like off of the stove somehow.
So they grouped up on her and held her down and
Yeah, and did this. And oh, she cried. And I can remember it was just so plain, and it was so, you know, because she never complained. So they just really ganged up.
So, was it still that way when your folks got home?
Yeah, when my mother got home and she was crying and she said, "What's the matter?" And she told them that they.
By that time she had the black on.
No, it was still there and the tears were running down in the black. And so I don't remember what Mom done to them. Of course she didn't spank them, but they had to do something.
Were there very many spankings given out by your parents?
Well, Sis says in the early part of my mother and dad's parenting that my dad was awful rough on them. Awful rough. But as he had more children, and I can remember, Sis thought he was going to kill Lorraine one time.
Really?
To make her pick up toys. She's asked me, I don't know how many times, "Can you remember that?" And I said, "No, I don't." And she said, "Maybe he was gone to school, but said she wouldn't pick up her toys and he was going to spank her till she did."
How old was I?
Well, you couldn't have been more than 3.
kind of a stubborn little thing, huh?
But anyway,
Like she moved out of camera
and of
shot. I
course,
could get them
Sis
both in
felt
the
like-
camera.
If Sis felt like you were hers,
Yeah.
why, it may have been worse than she thought.
Yeah.
But I,
Well, see, she felt responsible for me. That's what I got the impression when I was over there when she was so sick. And
well, you know, a lot of 14-year-old girls nowadays is always wanting babies. Be careful what they think till they have them for full time.
yeah.
But I know she didn't ever sleep. Take you to bed with her and sleep.
Well, it was probably a big help to her in later life when she didn't have children.
Yeah.
She at least felt like she raised somebody.
Yeah, she was home until I was 14. No. She was 14 when I was born. That's what it was.
I know a lot of kids that have raised siblings say, "I don't even want kids," because they feel like they've just had babies all their life to take care of.
My great grandson says, "I'm not going to have kids. I am not going to have kids," and he practiced. That's on the raising his brother and sister's hands, what he's doing. So it led him to be not good with children.
She kind of had to bully them. Is he married?
No.
See, if he finds somebody that he really cares about, maybe he'll change his mind, but will he change the way he takes care of
Will he change the way he takes care of children? That's the way you don't
Well,
know.
maybe he shouldn't have any then.
Well, anyway, I'm supposed to be talking about me, and I'm trying to, you know, other than
Whatever comes to mind, let's put it that way.
we all worked in the fields together, I know that, but she was usually on the plow, and I was behind a hoe or something like that.
Did you ever hide the seed under rocks like us kids did?
To keep from having to plant it?
Dennis and Sis done that, and they really got in trouble.
Oh, Pop figured out what they was doing?
It grew up, and they finally found his seed.
So we weren't original when we did it.
No, you weren't original, but you did it anyway. And Ines and I was sent after the cattle one time, and she was the oldest. And it was dark when we got home, and we had walked miles. I mean, they'd got out, and we were hunting them. And she's the one that got in trouble that night, because she was the oldest.
Because it had gotten dark before you got home?
Yeah, well, because we didn't bring them home. We didn't find them.
No, you never did find them.
I don't know. I don't know whether they came home or what happened, but we didn't find them.
So what was getting into trouble? What was your, just a talking to, or?
I think that was what it was that day. He didn't spank ordinary. But I remember him giving Ines one that I thought was way too much, but it probably wasn't.
Did he use his hand?
No, he raised his strop. But Pop wasn't like that ordinarily. That time, when
Did he
when
use a
you
razor
done
strap
something,
on me?
that's what he's supposed to be using. When Sis said you know, you got it, said I thought he was gonna kill her.
Maybe he'd had too many kids by that time.
Yeah, but he wasn't ever like that anymore. I never did know him to spank anybody else. Just a bad day. Just a bad day. He probably had a bad day
And
at
the
all.
kid wouldn't do what he was telling him to do.
Yeah. And Ines, what he spanked her for, and I never have told it in front of her kids because I didn't know what they'd think. But she was taking money out of his billfold and going out in the orchard. And that was at the McQueen place. We had cherry trees and saying she found it. And I know he couldn't have had much money in there because we didn't have money. You know, it was dimes and nickels. But it was the idea that he did not want her to start doing this, and I guess he never knew of it again.
Well, it sounds like the cases that he did spank were justified.
Uh-huh.
He didn't spank because you couldn't find the cows and he didn't come back home
No.
without them.
Right.
But when you did something they really wanted stopped as a
Yeah.
life habit,
Yeah.
like stealing, then he got you.
And it must have worked, that Ines
No, he never wasn't.
Lorena picked up her toys now.
I cleaned my house now.
Oh, you pick up my toys.
But anyway, for a big family, I thought we done mighty well, and we had lots of fun. If most kids now would complain and gripe and
With
everything,
the workload.
yes, they think
That
we
kids
were
don't
just
know how to
being
work.
worked to death. But that Pop was training us.
Mm-hmm.
He knew what he was doing, and he was keeping us out of meanness, and I know that.
But you know, I can't remember really what we did for fun. I can remember the ropes in the trees. We used to swing on the trees.
Work was fun.
Because you played together.
You did it together.
did it
You
together.
harmonized.
You talked and
Uh-huh.
cut up and had fun while you were doing it.
But as far as doing things just for fun, never. We played dominoes a lot when
Yeah,
you were
but
little.
swinging on ropes across the creek.
Yeah,
Don't you
that
remember
was
doing
our
that?
fun. We made our fun.
Yeah,
We jumped rope.
and I can remember with Betty Barker.
Yes.
I think you were gone, but Reef and Reba and I, we were playing hide and seek. Those trees out behind, last night. Anyway.
And
we were
the
playing
McLean place?
Your brothers.
Leon?
The way they were.
Yeah.
Or someplace where we drove by yesterday, I guess, the trees. We used to play hide and seek behind the trees,
Uh-huh.
and those were just spaced. I think it was something we drove by yesterday, and I thought, that looks like the trees where we used to play.
Uh-huh. The next place after when we lived where you were born, they tell me it's under a lake now, I don't know, but there was 8 or 9 big cedar trees out in the front yard, and you know the grass won't grow under those at all. And Marvin and I used to play, I don't know what we used for cars, but we had all kinds of roads under these trees. And I guess you all, Reuben, Ruthen, was probably in on it too, because we all played under those trees. And I used to want to go back there, and somebody told me that the lake was over that part now. And I know it was about 13 miles out of Stillwater, but I don't know.
West.
Yeah, west, somewhere west. I never knew of living east of Stillwater at all.
But this place brought to mind yesterday was, you mentioned that the Barkers were there too, and I thought, well, there's a possibility that there's trees everywhere, so who knows. But I don't remember that,
Well, the Barkers, I remember going to their house, and they're not very far away here, but I don't know if that house is still standing. They had, it was a rock house, and they had colored marbles or something in it.
I saw some rock houses that way.
Have you? And it's not very far away. They lived the Cimarron River. They lived about 1.5 miles back that way somewhere. And it was this kind of dirt. And I wondered last night, why don't we run onto this house? You know, it shouldn't be fell down by now.
not a rock house.
Grandma and Grandpa lived in there with them. And this was before they went to Kansas. Well, first they went to Disney. You know, they'd just lock it up and leave it and go to Disney. Went to Disney, and they lived up there because I stayed with Grandpa the fall before he died, and almost winter time.
Is that at Tonkawa?
No, that was at Disney.
I'm going to stop a minute.
Well, they made their
Probably
money
had
back.
that much money to have 2 or 3 houses.
They opened a business. They bought a business. See, I don't know if they rented it or they bought it already stocked. It was a parts store. And it was a big old building there at Disney, or to me it was big. The top had a living quarters, but they weren't able to live in it yet. So back of that, there was just a little aisle. And all these places, I said, they bought that.
Yeah.
All these places, they had cabins. And see, all these workers lived in these cabins, so they made a lot of money there.
Mm-hmm.
And then selling these parts. And Aunt Lula would carry her gun and put this money that they got that day in a bag and bring it down through that alley every night.
Mm-hmm.
And Grandpa and Grandma lived in a little long, oblong house like this. I don't remember any rooms being separated. And he wanted me to come up and so I could go to the store for him and different things. And me and Betty played more than I done anything.
That's
for
the
them.
cousin Betty that came to the last reunion.
Because I was 15, I guess,
What's her last name now?
longing. And
Did Wilma live around close at the time? The other cousin?
Wilma and Elma lived,
Are they sisters? Wilma and Betty? Okay,
Wilma
so
and Betty and Elma. And
I never
Bert
met
was their
Elma.
brother, and he was there too. He always went where they went, and he worked with them for a long time. And this keeping up these houses for these people and all that. And they see all this big building of this dam at Disney was being built. So that's how the money
Is that
was
part of Grand
flowing
Lake?
there, yeah. And so,
So they were working on building Grand Lake, some of them. Did your dad work?
Had a sense
he
of
just had he had a sense to know where to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Did your dad work on that dam?
No, he lived at Adair at the time.
He did more just farm work, basically, was his type of income.
Yes, and it was strange, Darlene, because he would always go, in his latter years, I don't know how he done it at first, but he'd get it all started. He'd help put in the crops, and then he would go somewhere else and work, and us kids would take care of the crops. Hoeing or whatever, plant them. That one day Carl come out there and there I was.
Didn't she say he was a black?
Standing out there with a mule.
She went through that whole album, the Dobson album, looked at everyone, she knew everyone. She thought I was Grandpa, you know, I look like Grandpa, she said, you know how that is. And she was also bright and cheery and amazing.
You wanna show me how to do that?
But
I should have got
Really?
her on the camcorder. Tell me again what happened.
Go through the book.
okay,
The great aunt that you visited died the next day?
right. It actually is my grandmother's sister. And what was her name?
Ruby.
Ruby Dobson. And on our way here, we stopped by to visit, and she was very bright and friendly, and went through a reunion album that we brought with us, and identified her family. And
She was 90.
she was 90.
She's gonna be 93.
Actually, she
The 19, or 94, the
So she was 92, almost 93.
right, and she was claiming her 93rd birthday. We asked her what her age was. She says, I'm 93. And then I said, well, when is your birthday? Because she was telling us the date, and she says, I'm counting ahead.
So she didn't quite make the 93.
No. So,
But you visited her on Friday on the way here.
I wonder.
And she reminded us so much
That's
of
her.
Bessie.
Bessie, my grandmother,
I thought it was
Mom's,
clear in the card.
Alice Robertson's
Clear.
mother.
Yeah, it's clear.
And she
Yeah,
were
it looks
sisters,
like
and she was
my
the
mother's
youngest of
mother.
that family.
Her sister.
But she had features of my grandmother, and also she was quiet and gentle, just like grandmother was. And she just sat there and just loved it. You know, every minute we were looking at that book. You
I
know.
thought they were clear.
But when you meet somebody and then you realize you were a part of their last day of their life, you know, it's kind of...
She died the same night you were there. She died Friday night.
Yeah, she did.
Is that
Well, they
right?
found her that
Well,
morning.
we
Yeah,
don't know if it was that night or that morning, but we can say night.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, she.
Huh, that's amazing.
It is.
But the kids didn't think it was from the visit tying her. She
And
just,
she was smiling, and she even got up and walked us to the door.
Yes, you did.
You know,
well, it sounds like she had a very enjoyable last day.
It was wonderful, and I kept telling my sisters that it was sort of like being able to tell my grandmother goodbye.
for you two. And we had
Yeah.
found,
You spent her last day.
Yeah.
and another thing, we visited her son right here in Stillwater, out off of 51.
Howard Hunt.
We went to, and she still has her homestead out there. Actually, she lived not far from Grandma and Grandpa Robertson. Really?
No,
The
well,
Howard.
no, it's Bohannon. The Bohannon clan lived right there.
Didn't,
That's where my mom grew up, let's say, or she lived there.
Well, that makes sense on the two families eventually
Yeah.
mixing, because back then you didn't travel a long way
I
to
was
find a
thinking it
spouse.
was,
Not where Dennis and Alice.
yeah,
No,
okay.
that's totally different. This is where Bohannons were sharecropping.
Yeah, but they were, okay, but it was just outside Stillwater.
Janet,
Yes, about 3 or 4 miles.
come this way.
And Howard sisters, her
Oh, okay, that's fine, yeah.
So,
I just
what is
didn't
that
want-
road coming in?
Crossing from here again.
177? Is it? No, not 177. What is it?
51.
51, yeah. It's in after you leave Highway 35W on Highway 51.
I-35 on the
3
51.
miles, 3 or 4 miles off the highway. You can see the highway from there home.
Oh, I bet it's on your
I'm gonna stop it there.
house and set right there. So there was a difference. It's the way he remembers and the way she remembers,
That's
and
what
she
I
was
thought.
about 2 years older than he was.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but she said that her mother said that they looked out the window one morning and the Indians were dancing around the windmill. And they were having, I don't know what kind of a dance, but they were dancing around the windmill when my mother was young in that place. And that he remembers it like that.
Oh,
And she remembered with the windmill and he doesn't. So,
Yes.
so
Okay, before we Oh, that's the place in the, Before we get any, okay. Now, you're gonna tell us a story about going to the cemetery yesterday?
No,
No,
Just tell
you're
me
gonna,
about the house. No, we all went to the cemetery.
Yeah. So you're gonna start with a story in the car, or the moving to Arkansas, where are you starting?
We're gonna start where we went last night. The
Oh,
house
last night.
where we went last
Okay.
night.
Oh, that house.
Yeah, we're gonna move from there.
Okay.
Okay, we're moving now. Everybody knows about sharecroppers. They moved at least once a year. And out of all the schools that I went to the 10th grade, and I went to 9 different schools in all parts of the country.
Always in Oklahoma, or
Always
no,
in
Oklahoma and Arkansas?
No,
You
they
didn't go-
were all in Oklahoma.
Take the school bus?
And walked. I walked as high as 3.5 miles to school. But anyway, the next move we made was, I don't know where this place is. They said 13 mile west of Stillwater. And they called it then the Low Place. They called the people that owned it was Lowe's. But at that time when we lived there, my mother and Dennis, I don't know if you girls remember any of you, but he had typhoid fever
Yes.
and almost died. The word was out that he was dead. We had people coming from everywhere for sympathy.
Thank you.
And he wasn't, but
How old was he?
he must have been 17. Somewhere in there, because
And he and Grandma had it at the same time.
and they had it at the same time. Everybody in that community was the nicest people you ever saw. We had high gear that was like feed, like we saw beside the road, only the heads were white. And we had acres of that. I don't know how many. And neighbors came from everywhere and helped put that up in shops and brought their dinners. And we had, just people coming and eating and working all day long. And they would come and set up with him, but they couldn't any of them read the thermometer. And so Sis had to wake up and read the thermometer, how high their temperature was. Or no matter what time it was, she was the one that was woke up to read the thermometer. And there was one lady by the name of Mrs. Beckelhammer. She was so faithful. She was there every day. And I don't know how long we lived at this place, a year or a year and a half. We moved to another place called the Williams Place. And my dad was working on WPA at the time, so he would be gone a week at a time. He'd help put in the crop, and then it'd be left. And all the girls was farmed out to taking care of some lady with a birth or, something.
You mean the girls, that was part of family
That
money
was part of the way they
that they
did it.
made living?
Uh-huh.
The girls were farmed out.
After they got to be 15, 16, 17 years old, I think Needy worked for a family with a baby that year, and Sis was working for a family, and she said, Pop and Mom come by to go to town, and she said, I had my clothes packed, and out of that house I came, and he said, what's wrong? And she said, I won't stay here another night. So he just said, okay, let's go. But said he didn't ask any questions, but the man had got out of line. And she said, I will not stay here another night. So he never seemed to tell her anymore to go work for such and such. She picked her own people. But always before he found the jobs. And
No, wait a minute, who found the jobs?
my dad would find
Oh.
somebody that needed a girl to help him out for a while. And I even done that. After Carl and I was married, when we went to Missouri, I was going to work for a neighbor that had 6 children. They had a new baby, and they wanted me to come and stay with them, so I was going to. But the day before, I had already became pregnant, and I worked in the helped my dad plant potatoes and carry the big 5-gallon bucket, so the next morning I wasn't able to go. But anyway, back to our story. We was on the low place, and then we moved to the Williams place, and we would do the best we could at this farm bit, and taking care of what few cows we had.
Was that is a stint on one farm like a year or less?
A year, no, usually always a year,
Okay.
about a
So
year.
long
But we
time to
had
get
to
the
have
crop.
spent more on these 2 farms, or this one. I think we must have been at the Lowe's farm about 2 years. And then we moved to the Williams place, and I know we were there a year, close from the time Lorena was born, and then we moved to Arkansas, which was 38. We lived the Lowe place, the Williams place, and then Lorena and my mother had pneumonia. And we moved to a little old, I mean, it was a shack. I guess just the whole time, because my dad had been to Arkansas, and he had rocked the house down there for somebody, and made this deal that we would go down there to farm the next spring. So I guess we were just in this little shack until we could get ready to go. I don't know why we were there, but it was just a little room. I can't remember the details on this room, but there was the folks' bed, and the rest of us climbed a ladder-like thing to get in an attic, and that's where we slept. And one night, there was Sis and me and Rita and Lorena and my dad and mother, Marvin. And Sis woke up just in time to save all of our lives. I guess a mouse had got a match or something and set the place on fire, and she caught it in time and put it out with I guess she just grabbed anything she could get and smothered it. But anyway, then when Lorena was able, had this move to Arkansas. And Orville Woods, that's our cousin Orville, Aunt Thelma's first marriage, her kids was Woods. And he came, and I don't really know, I guess there was too many of us, because Dennis and Alice went with us, and they had their Model A, and we had Orville's car, and Uncle Roy took everything we had, including horses, now, so you know we didn't have much, and put it in the back of a truck, and hauled it to Arkansas, and it was raining. Everything was wet when we got there. And on my dad, where he had rocked his house, why, he had Orville stop and leave my mother and Rita and Lorena up there, and they spent the night up there. And it was February 14th, 1938, and it was rainy and cold and damp and everything wet. We couldn't build a fire. We didn't have any beds. So Dennis and Alice took the seats out of their car and brought them in, put them in the floors, and we used that kind of to all stay together and covered up with coats, and that's how we spent the night.
Must have been cozy.
And it was, oh my, it was,
together to be warm.
it wasn't warm. It
So my
was,
dad and mom had just been married.
well, they'd just been married a short while.
Yeah, 'cause it's 38.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you said it was too dark for anybody to find a way,
Too
and
dark
you didn't
for
have anything
anybody
to
to
start a
find
fire
wood or-
with.
Put up a stove or anything, because it was all in this truck and it was stuck in the mud.
I'm going to get a little bit technical. We really wasn't Arkansas.
Well, no, but it was,
Really close.
How
but
much?
still
4 miles
Oklahoma.
from the
Adair
state
County,
line.
Oklahoma.
Adair.
Adair
Adair.
County, Oklahoma.
So was the way to Arkansas or not?
No, they weren't on the way. The
They were
place he-
settling
no,
there.
that is where
When
they
you say he rocked a house, you mean he
flint rocks and cement, and you rock a house, just like you
Like
was a
would.
mason, like a mason.
Mhm.
Grandpa did this.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh.
A man of all trades.
He
Yes,
did
sir.
that, and he did a store after we got there. He did a service station.
What about Carl and his dad coming to help the next day?
Yeah, Carl his dad brought their horses the next day.
Were they neighbors or?
Yeah, they were, I don't know who knew anything about sending to get the horses. But
But Mom and Pop didn't know them before that,
No.
did they?
no, they
No,
were
they just showed up
strangers,
to help.
But they came to help. And so they got the truck started to help the horses, of course, and then
This
horses-
Orville Wood you mentioned, he just went along to help. Was he a friend or?
Yeah, well, he's a cousin.
Oh, he was a cousin.
Aunt Zelma's first marriage. She had
Okay.
4 children.
Mm-hmm.
And Velma is a sister to Eva.
Oh, okay,
You know,
gotcha. Okay,
Yeah,
I see.
and that was a cousin, and he went along to help, and he took his car then and took Uncle Roy, and they went to town and spent the night. And then we were left stranded. But anyway, we made it.
Who was Uncle Roy?
But Barker, that's Saint Lula's.
Grandma's sister.
Lula Robertson.
No, Grandpa's.
Grandpa Robertson's sister's husband.
Okay.
But you were telling about when Carl showed up.
Yeah, when Carl, he was out there making the horses pull the truck out, and Alice looked out the window, and she said, Lucille, there's your husband out there.
And they'd never met at this
And
point.
we never saw each other before.
Oh,
my,
Pete.
just a man, a boy.
Oh, Pete.
So anyway,
Alice picked out her husband.
planted the seed out my husband and didn't know it.
Oh, Pete. Isn't that amazing? Wow.
Daddy said there was quite an argument about whether or not those horses could pull that truck out. But they put some sort of help underneath the wheels and those horses pull out.
And then Carl, he thinks the world of my dad because when he asked him, he said, how long would it take 2 men to cross-cut 20 rake of wood? My dad asked him. And he said a week. And said my dad looked at him kind of strange, and he said, how long? And he said a week. And he said, well, would you help me? Because he was putting wood in school for the winter, and he was getting paid for it, so he asked Carl if he'd help him.
The crosscut saws where one
Crosscut
man's
saw.
on one end and another, and they manually
Yeah.
do all this.
And of course, my dad hadn't had anybody very big to saw with him for a long time, and he'd been sawing with us girls and Marvin, and so he took real short strokes. And of course, Carl had been cutting wood for a living for a good long while with his dad, and he went, ooh, ooh, ooh. And he said it took me a long time to get him stretched out, but when I got him where he could stretch out, why then said, we really cut wood, and they did. They had their wood cut and delivered. And
So how much would Rick?
20
Rick.
Rick.
And when you met Carl like that day, I mean, how
How many
old was
cords was
Carl?
Rick?
When I
I
met
think
him?
it's Rick's in a cord, I'm not
Cords 38, 32 cubic feet. So it's about
20.
20 and you were 16.
sure.
Yeah.
So it's a
No, I
cord
wasn't
smaller
16
unit.
then, I was 14.
34 by
You were
4 by
when
4
we-
by
So it was 2
Mad.
years before you got married.
32 cubic feet of cord.
Yeah.
So you were married
So
at
20
16.
Ricks.
And they not only cut it, they split it.
And delivered it and stacked it.
And from noon on Monday till noon on Saturday, they were finished.
And delivered it with a horse and trailer.
So that's for the school.
Yeah, that was for Beaver School. And that was where I finished my 8th grade. Teacher, she told my dad, said, she's going to have a hard time passing.
Sound like Grandpa was very industrious.
He was.
Cut wood, rock houses,
Just about
farm.
anything that anybody, he was like anyone else, you know, don't stand in front of me if you don't want me to learn how to do it.
That's amazing.
Wasn't he also a blacksmith?
Yes, he was a blacksmith.
Did he work on the train?
He worked on the train tracks. When he
Train tracks.
lived in the boxcars, he worked on the tracks. I don't know what he done.
I found a note that I'd written this morning that Aunt Sis told me he, at night, walked the tracks with a lantern, checking the tracks to see if they were okay. But I don't know if he must have had something else to do.
I knew there was something about the train because we used to think he was a conductor. Yeah. Well. And so, your dad was told you might not pass the 8th grade?
Yeah, because, well, I was a stubborn little gal. I mean, I was. And she would intimidate me, the teacher would. And so I wouldn't answer the questions. So I had, she didn't have any way of passing me. It was, we had to go to the county to take the county exam. That's the way you got out of 8th grade back then. So when I got my grade, she was shocked to death. I had A's and B's.
Did Dad how far did he go in his education?
He was in the 7th grade, the last I remembered, and they took him out to the farm.
I was always amazed. He
He
built
may
that
have
house
even got that,
and
he may have
wired
even
it.
started in the 8th, I'm not sure. I know he went where I was telling you there, where Lorena was born. I know he started that year, but I think they took him out, and I don't think he got to finish it. And that was probably his 8th year.
So you were saying that I was stubborn, and you're saying you're stubborn. Did it run in the
I
family?
think it kind of did at certain ages.
Well,
And she's still stubborn.
You had to stand up for yourself.
Well, I guess you felt like with nine of us in one family, we kind of had to take up for ourselves once in a while.
Yeah.
Except for Mother, you intimidated her to death.
Well, she was intimidated, as I told you. That one day, anyway,
I would think the way you lived,
because
everyone had to be persistent and stay at what they were doing in a stubborn way to accomplish anything.
everyone had to
It's
work.
right.
So-
Even if
so-
everyone had their
So
job.
Grandpa was the boss.
Grandpa was the boss.
He found the jobs and he kept you organized, and
Well,
the money had to roll in to keep the family going,
Yes.
right?
yes,
Okay, who collected the money?
the girls did, but he usually got a lot.
Okay, well, it's interesting. Wow, what a
Who did the correcting? Grandpa?
way that'll be today.
Grandpa did.
She would correct us, but she never,
Yes.
I don't ever remember my mother getting loud with me, ever.
That's very interesting.
She could talk to you,
Yes.
reason with you.
So how many were there in this party? You went to Arkansas, but you never said, you went down, what was the place called? This place where they rocked this house, but it wasn't like the others you had, like a Wilson place, and so forth.
This was going out in Carl, I don't remember.
Oh, okay, so you don't know.
It was
I
just
don't
in
know.
Adair,
It was a
Oklahoma.
farm.
It was a farm. This
Okay.
is where we raised 9 acres of tomatoes and 4 acres of green beans. Now, if you just like to pick those.
Now, you said Adair, this was Adair, but
Yeah.
where is the springs? Is that the same place you're talking
No,
about?
we moved again.
I mean, that is Arkansas, right?
No.
And the springs?
No, that's
Oh, really?
half a mile from the state line. That's as close as we got.
Oh, I always thought it was Arkansas.
No, we weren't.
So you literally didn't go to Arkansas.
We did move to Missouri though later, didn't we?
Yeah.
Now, how many beans? How many beans?
4 acres.
4 acres, and so that was your total crop right there? Did you hay and all that stuff on top of it? So just tomatoes, row crops?
You needed the
You had
whole,
to pick them,
We
Harvest
picked
them?
them by hand, all of them.
and tomatoes?
Picked those.
Now, those are kind of a perishable crop, so then you had to haul them somewhere
All
for
of them
market?
to Siloam Springs. And then, see, he could just imagine, I guess, my dad could just imagine, with 9 acres of tomatoes and 4 acres of green beans, we was gonna get rich. Anyway, we was gonna have a good living that summer. But nobody told him when he rented this place and went down there that after a certain length of time, the cannery wouldn't take them. They wouldn't even take the tomatoes. My mother canned tomatoes till they ran out our ears, and we gave tomatoes away. And then we hired a truck. We found out we could sell them pink. You know, we could, and wrap them, or we'd sell them pink. They wrapped them and hauled them west somewhere. And so we got to doing that, and that was illegal because they hadn't even took enough of them yet to pay for the fertilizer that was thrown. So,
Did you tell me they were taken to the railroad at some and sent out on? No,
I
they were
don't know. I think they were hauled by truck.
The trucks came to your house?
What do you mean
Came to
truck?
the house.
What do you mean truck? A motorized truck? I mean, it couldn't have been,
There was
they had trucks. I mean, the old Model T type thing.
no, this was a bigger truck.
Oh,
It
really?
came from Tulsa, I think, and it was a slat bed.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know,
that's
like
right.
a
This is
flat bed,
38.
only
Okay.
it had slats on it, and
Sure.
they put these tomatoes in crates about like this, wooden crates.
Yeah, sure. That's right.
And the individual farmer didn't have that kind of equipment. You had to hire a commercial truck to come get them.
They paid you for a certain amount of pounds.
This would be like a cannery, or whoever's receiving this would
I don't
pay
know
you.
if they put them in, whoever came after them with this truck,
Yeah, they would-
paid us, and they don't know if I don't think they canned them, they were too green to can.
Isn't that amazing? Grandpa was an entrepreneur that way.
They probably
Farmer
put 'em in
and
storage,
deal and pay
You
and
know, I'd say.
He just could make an
somewhere
X.
where they couldn't grow
Huh?
tomatoes so
I'm
easily.
serious.
Probably shipped
He
them
must have
north.
been quite a communicator, a negotiator, I mean, you know? Wow, that's really interesting.
Well,
It makes me have a lot of respect for him.
Don't you wish you'd visited and asked more questions? I mean, you always think of it too
Seems
late.
like we all love tomatoes so much. We
Yeah.
just got-
Yeah, that's true. Wow.
now, I understood that the Grishams put out tomatoes and you all helped them.
Six
And then
acres.
they helped you put out tomatoes. So was it altogether 9 acres?
No,
Or did you
they
have
had
9 and they
6
had
acres.
6?
They had 6.
And you
we had
helped
9.
with both groups.
9 acres, that's like.
So they actually worked on
large.
15 acres of tomatoes.
Now watering, how would you do the watering?
We-
Tomatoes take a lot of water.
Down there,
Oh, it rains.
if it rained, you got good tomatoes. If it didn't,
Oh, it
You
just,
lost.
Mother Nature was your friend.
Yeah.
Oh.
So how long did you spend there?
we was there a year, and then we moved to another little house where Lorena told
And what, it would just happen to be that Grandpa thought, well, okay, this is probably make a few bucks here. I mean, you could find somewhere else as well.
Yeah.
And he just made acquaintance, and he rocked that house, and he just was there, and he thought,
Yeah.
or somebody knew him. and-
Somebody, I don't know how he managed. We never knew how
So he was
made
sort of
this
like a
deal.
sharecropping, he was like a contractor. I
I
mean, this is amazing to me.
Anyway, the next little place we moved, there was, I don't know how we got by there, because we weren't there very long, and it was just a little place and a little house,
And not very far from this first place.
not very far, about 2.5 miles. And down over the hill is how we got our water. It just went right down over a big hill, and there was a spring running out. No way. And a lot of times, instead of washing our clothes at the house, we took them over to the spring. Over on this side, there was 2 springs, one on the right and one down here.
Okay, wait a minute, back up. How many were in your party? I think I asked that. I didn't hear you say.
How many was in the party that,
That's where you grew all these tomatoes and all that, and then you moved, so did they all move together? But how many were there?
It was just her family.
But some had already left
No,
home.
you've got, there's some people added.
there was Sis and Marvin and Pop and me and Dennis and Alice that spent the night there. That was the coach when we first moved in.
Yeah,
Is
when
that
we
what
first-
you're talking about?
Yeah, but you stayed there and you did this crop, this sharing this.
Oh, how many was there?
Yeah, you worked this whole system.
Marvin, my dad, my mom, me, Reba, and Lorena.
Dennis and Alice came back to
Dennis
Oklahoma,
and Alice were just there to help us.
and they just
They just
came
helped
back.
you move, okay, I
And
got
then
you.
they came back.
And then they came back later?
No.
I don't know.
Okay, so they were on their own, they
They
just,
were
they
on
helped you
their
move and went on their own.
And went on to their
Okay.
place of business, wherever he was
Bigger
working.
and better things.
Yeah.
They probably survived then by sharecropping, also working for somebody
They
else.
worked for Ralph Folt till they went to California, I think.
Ralph
I
Folt.
don't know whether he started right then, I don't know when he started working for him.
Do
But
you
I
think Dad, when he started out, that he had, he saved some money? I know he went to CC's, didn't he, for a while, to help the family with money? That's
he
what I
went to
can,
the CC's.
and that was to help the family with money.
Oh, well, it probably was. Now, I don't,
I mean, Grandpa farmed him out to CC's.
I think Grandpa had
Very
something to do
possible.
with it. But anyway, I don't know about the money. I don't know what CC's made. I have no idea.
I know it's Colorado Springs. No,
Yeah, it was.
Grand Junction.
Yeah, Grand Junction,
Yeah.
Colorado. That's where it was at.
Yeah, I know that part.
Dave, you said you had a lot of respect for your grandfather. But think of the respect for grandma having 9 kids and moving every year.
And working in the fields
Pick
and
up
all
and
of it.
go and move to a new place every year.
Did she work too, just like your girl? She did early in life, but later in life she didn't. It was just a chore.
Well, she had the children. She dragged me along on a cotton.
But she used to work, yeah, she used to work.
Cotton sack.
I can remember the cotton sacks and her in the field and Sis, I guess, was the cook, the bottom washer from the time she was about 7 years old.
She remembers
And she
standing
worked
on
in the
a
field a lot.
And you said she stayed home instead of being farmed out more than the rest of the older girls.
After we moved down there, as long as she was up here, she was working somewhere around Stillwater. But when we went to Siloam, I don't think she had but one job outside the home, and they just wasn't plentiful down there. There wasn't nobody to work for.
I mean, she was needed to raise the twins and Lorena.
Well, I don't know if she was needed, but she was there.
I bet she was needed.
I mean, was all needed, but
Who performed most, like, we call it first aid now, but, doctoring, kind of had the concept of helping people stay well, and, or do you worry about it?
in the family,
Yeah.
I guess we didn't worry about it till somebody got sick. There was hardly ever any doctors involved. Now, when we had typhoid and pneumonia, and I can remember when Lorena was born, I mean, I can remember when the doctor came,
Yeah, in those days, the doctors came to the house.
and
Sometimes.
then they always did. And,
If you called one.
yeah, you called one.
But probably with a lot of the early births, there was no doctor involved.
There was no doctor involved in my first child's birth.
Probably with your
Couldn't get
mothers.
one.
With your mothers either. It was just
And I doubt it.
probably when Lorena and the twins.
No, I think my mother had a doctor most always.
Oh, did
Twins
she?
were, and now, I don't know about earlier. I don't know how brave my dad was back then. I don't know, if he delivered any babies or not, but I never heard of it.
But
Now,
a lot
he
of the
was he
neighbors
always
served
kind
as
of
midwives.
Was he a soft-spoken person?
Yeah.
He never got excited, angry, and old temper, or,
I never knew of my dad getting
that's amazing.
angry,
Oh, that's amazing.
not mad, not, enough to ready to beat up somebody. I never knew.
Okay. Wow.
So really, both Clarence and Eva were gentle, soft-spoken.
They had to be. Raised 9 kids.
Well, I mean, how...
So when he
We're
felt
not-
like you all, when he felt like somebody was not acting right and he whipped them, like you told us earlier with the razor strap, he wasn't angry.
No,
He was just making a point.
he made a point.
He used to threaten me with the razor strap, and I took him so serious. He was just playing.
But now Carl's always doing that, and his grandkids take him serious too.
Oh, I remember how scared I felt. And that made me want to shy away from him.
Yeah,
My grandfather
They don't
said that
realize
to me.
Yeah, and
They
I
don't
wish I
realize that, but
would
it's
have,
what it does to
yeah.
you.
yeah.
Okay, you moved 2.5 miles.
Uh-huh.
And what was that place called?
But
The
it seems
spring.
like when you were sharecropping, you called it by the person's name, but when you rented, you don't know who. So you were renting down there, right?
Well, I know that first place, it wasn't sharecropping, no. So I guess he did rent that. I don't know how he got the money from it, but I guess he did because we didn't sharecrop with anybody.
But it was in a place called Beaver Springs Hollow,
Yeah, it was in,
the second place, Beaver Springs Hollow.
Oh, Beavers.
Mhm.
and it was a little two-room house. One of the kitchen was pretty good size going this way. I don't know how much, maybe. I say pretty good size. It probably took in from here to the window. And the other room went this way. And I can remember now there was, all of us was there. My mother, my dad, sis, me, Marvin, Rita, Reva, and Lorena. And we lived there for about 3 months. And then Ines and Edwin and Estella came from Florida. So there was 8, 9, 10, 11 of us in that little place. I don't know how we slept. I know my dad built a makeshift room back here, just big enough for him and Mom's bed. Just big enough for him to go over and get in. And they'd pull a curtain across the door, you know. And the rest of us, I guess we just slept everywhere, all over the house. But anyway, then we lived there a while, and then the next step was moving to Adair. And Edwin took all of us, except my dad and Marvin, in the car. And my dad and Carl helped him, and Marvin loaded all we had in a wagon, and they started with, I count 3, I don't know how many horses or mules there was in the 4. I know 4 horses. Maybe it was 3 horses and a mule. But I know,
And wasn't there a cow tied behind?
no,
No cow?
we didn't take a cow. Didn't have a cow.
A dog.
There was a dog, but I don't know if he was tied or just going along. And it took them 3 days to get 60 miles, which I guess is pretty good traveling for a wagon. I don't know, but we thought they never was going to get there, but they finally made it. But in the meantime, we were out there with nothing, you know, had no beds, no nothing. So I don't know what we done there. I just don't even remember.
Is that the trip where Carl used to talk about they'd stop along the way and talk to people along the way, and it was funny the way Carl
Oh,
used
yeah,
to
he
tell
said
it.
when they went through some town, Salina. He said my dad was always whistling at the horses and giddy up, you know, and he was always what was Carl doing? Anyway,
He was singing and Marvin was whistling.
he
I
was
think.
singing, no, and Marvin had a knot tied in the rope, and he was beating on the side of the wagon. And then you'd see people come up and stick their heads in the window, and then next thing you know, they'd be gone, just like a flash, and there'd be about 5 up there. He had more fun on that trip, and I said, what did you eat? Well, for breakfast, my dad fried. He cooked too. Oh, yeah. My dad was the cook, and he cooked sweet potatoes, and biscuits for breakfast. He fried bread on top of it, whatever he was using. And then for supper, they'd have fried potatoes, just potatoes, and bread. And then he said that's what we ate all the way. They just eat 2 meals a day.
Now, in these travels, did they shoot game or anything? I mean, would they?
No.
Okay, so it's totally vegetables. Whatever they had like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, when we got out there and we didn't have any meat to eat, well, there were a lot of jackrabbits that ate there.
Yeah.
So the boys would kill rabbits. But otherwise, no.
Where did Granddad get rabbit fever?
In Missouri,
Oh, he went to
tick
Missouri.
fever.
Tick fever. From a rabbit, they thought?
No, from a tick.
But I mean, they didn't know where he got the ticks then. So rabbit wasn't involved. I'd always heard from Mother and Daddy they wouldn't eat rabbits because...
Well, rabbits will do the same thing to you. It's almost the same thing, but it was in cleaning the rabbits. It's not the rabbit, it's in cleaning it. If they have sores on them, on their body, then you get that in your, you have any cuts on your hand, why, then it gets in the bloodstream.
You know, they were always afraid of...
But my
eating
dad got a
rabbits.
tick. They saw the tick, they know it. And that's what they called it, tick fever. And they called all the kids home, except me. I knew he was bad sick, but I couldn't go. I was about ready to have Clarence, so.
Oh, my goodness, that's sick too.
Yeah, he was bad up in Missouri.
Was that the first time he really got sick?
Yeah, his health.
That was the only time my dad was ever, I've heard him have gallstones. You could hear him for half a mile hollering, but never, I never did go to the doctor.
He never had surgery for it.
He went to the doctor and they gave him some kind of pills. I don't know whether they dissolved it or whether they, you know, what happened. But he was never a milk drinker. That is so strange. You know, they say if you drink milk or eat a lot of milk products, it causes you to have gallstones. He never drank milk.
It was gallstones and not kidney stones?
Well, it could have been kidney stones. Probably kidney stones, not gallstones, but it would have been the same difference. Milk's supposed to cause them.
But when you said you could hear him yelling, I thought passing the stone would be
Right.
very painful, and so maybe it was.
He would probably pass a stone when he was like that.
Gallbladder makes you throw
Yeah.
up.
So Grandpa started with this large family, and as time went by and girls got married and left, he kind of lost his workforce there. How do you handle that?
Well, he done fine because it wasn't after they passed, after they was out of the way, there was many less to feed. And when he went to Wichita, they went to Wichita then, or they first went to, where did they go?
From
They
Atlanta,
went
was
to-
it to Missouri?
They went to California.
We were in Pearson.
Oh, yeah, when they came back from Missouri, they moved. We went to Adair from there, and then they went to Missouri, moved to Missouri.
Is that a sharecropping job? Or?
Now, that one I don't know about. Uncle Roy had that deal,
Yeah, Uncle Roy
and I
did
have
that.
no idea what that deal was. But I do know that they wasn't making anything to eat, and when Marvin went home with Sis and Ed and worked on the dairy, why, he sent his money home to us.
Do you know where in Missouri it was?
Lamar was the closest town, isn't that right?
We lived in Lamar for a while.
Lamar, Missouri. Me and Carl was up there for about, I don't know how long, we was quite a while.
Seemed like he could have made money with the moving company with all the experience the kids had.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Could move people from 1 a week and survive.
Yeah.
And Marvin being left behind too with all these girls. I mean,
Yeah.
after Dennis got married, there was just Marvin and all the girls.
I bet he was a cut-up.
I bet he was spoiled.
He wasn't spoiled. He
Nobody was.
could have been a boss.
It sounded like occasionally one of the girls had come back home with her husband. Like you said Ines, and
Yeah, I was.
Edwin came back once.
And me and Carl was there a lot.
Tell the story of Carl out in the cornfield or somewhere when Reba was she
With
picking
Polly. With
yeah,
Polly.
yeah.
We was chopping cuckleburs out of corn in the hay there. And, of course, we all had hoes. I don't care if you was 6 or 10 or 11 or how old you was. You all had hoes. Maureen was about 8, I guess. And we had to chop the cuckleburs out of this corn. So we would go on, everybody minding his own business, and pretty soon we would say, Carla, help me. She'd be way behind, standing leaning on her hoe.
What would she call her?
She was calling, she couldn't talk plain, none of
Cobble.
them could, and they cobble.
Here's Carl tell this story. And
Oh,
it's
Carl,
hilarious.
okay. I was trying to-
And he'd catch her up and turn around, and directly she'd be hollering at him, standing back there leaning on her hoe, and all the rest of them, Lorraine and everybody else could keep up, but Reba didn't seem to want to. She wanted Carl to help her catch up. Oh, he teased her about that.
So what, when a deal like that, what would you do? Each of you take a row or something, and then
Each
that
of
was
us
your
had a
row.
Your
And you
row.
get it, you work all day until you get it done or
You
whatever?
work all day, and when you get through with that, you go back on another one until you get the field done, whichever day it is, or if it's the next day.
What a life.
Ah.
At this point, you were married. I don't think you would have caught them all.
I don't think we was
No,
married
no,
yet.
no.
He was probably just out there seeing. Come out ever.
Marvin didn't get to go to
Back there
school
was a grocery
There
store.
too well. I
Until
think
we were
There was no
married.
Right.
grocery store.
I'll ask Lucille, but
That's right.
Lucille, when did Marvin leave,
Yeah, I've been to the
have to stop school and start working in the field on, how old?
I've been
14?
Town on Saturday.
I doubt he was that old. Probably 13. He never got to finish school.
And he wasn't a very big 13
No.
when he had to,
He started growing, though, but he quit school at that little place at Beaver Springs. He didn't finish there. He started helping Pop do something. I don't know what they were doing.
I thought I kind of remembered him with us and you walking to school.
At first he did, when we got there, first year. But when we moved to that other school, I can't ever remember.
And how far was that to school there?
From there, 1, 2, about 2 miles.
And that was my first year of school, I think, so
You
I
had
was
what, 2
5.
miles?
Yeah.
Oh.
Where did
With Marvin's long legs, I would touch
So her first year of school was at Deeper or
5 years old.
She never went to Green Valley.
Did you ever even,
No.
even when you lived up there by the Grisham?
So what was a school like that you went to? What would it be like? Room this size right here?
Probably. And
They always have them big stoves in it, wood stoves?
Half the kids
that
were
type of-
Robertsons, probably.
at one school we went and we was all in it. At one school that I remember. No, Lorena wouldn't be, and Lisa and Reba wouldn't be, but the rest of us would be all there. All in the same
So now,
room.
the schoolmaster
Oh,
was
same room.
usually a guy,
No,
a woman?
woman.
Same teacher.
Wow.
Never had a man.
All the women teachers. Wow, I'd like to do that. huh?
Did Grandma in all these moves, now I imagine you had to make
Kind
your
of
own
school I
clothes.
went to.
Oh,
You
really?
had a
Yeah.
sewing machine.
Yeah.
So every time you moved, you moved
Multi-grade
this
and the
big sewing
teachers all
machine
as press.
everywhere you went.
It was.
And they
big
weren't
enough
just
that
these
it
little
was
handlings
just
carry around.
No, it
four
was
grades
the old time. Old
Travel
travel
They would
singer.
all be together.
And you
Sewing
so made all the clothes.
And 5 through that.
Exact, right.
Yeah.
We complained today about
My girls wore exact clothes until they got in high school.
So back in those days, you didn't have time, you know, to get your work done in the morning and then go to the mall in the afternoon.
Oh, there was no mall.
Tell them about the play parties.
There was no shopping. For entertainment, they did have play parties. You've heard of square dancing, only it's not square. there they had play parties and they sing.
That was entertainment?
That was entertainment for the young kids. And you'd walk 6, 7 miles to go and play. Didn't have any
To
other
just
way to
different
go.
neighbors?
Just
the neighbor's house?
Yeah, this was just neighbors' houses.
How would you hear about it?
They didn't invite you.
So, but I mean, they'd have to have a runner, you didn't have a phone or anything like that all
Yeah,
the time.
there's usually a little guy on a bicycle coming.
Ah,
Is that right?
So you didn't have enough horses to go around, like, to use horses to go,
No.
huh?
They were workhorses.
They were workhorses, those were, they didn't.
People at your house would start walking, and as you walk by other houses, they'd fall in with you, and you'd all walk to this play party?
Yeah, but sometimes they'd be 14, 15 of us walking.
now, what ages? Were they all kind of the same age?
All from about, let's see, Marvin was
Totally
probably
different
the youngest,
style from
he was probably about 13, probably
okay.
13,
Totally
maybe
different.
20.
Just think what we accomplished in a day.
So when we lived in Missouri, I can remember going to the neighbors, and they would, a group would sing,
Yeah, and play music.
yeah.
Hey, good.
And the young ones would go to sleep behind the
This might
stove.
be why it's kind of hard to
Always
trace
have half
some
in
of
it,
the family back.
you know?
They moved around, there was no
And we still complained.
And you couldn't go to the grocery store and buy a loaf of bread.
The
No.
Depression.
Every day
Yeah.
Grandma made bread, I'm sure.
Every day.
That poor woman, she's wore out.
But anyway, after they went to
Oh, no.
Missouri, I don't know how long they were there. I
Who was
wasn't with them.
who was the teacher at home? How'd you learn? Just learn by osmosis, or did you, I mean, just by looking and watching and whatnot, or did someone actually teach?
Well, I think we just mostly learned by gosh and by
Golly.
golly.
You said once yesterday that if anybody needed help with math, Granddad was the
Yeah,
math person.
yeah, and he taught us a lot. When we would be big enough to even start counting, he'd set us up a table.
Your grandfather.
Of an
Her dad.
And we'd play dominoes till bedtime.
Oh, okay.
If we had any spare time, we played dominoes.
He had a good memory.
He did?
Did he?
Oh,
How often did, I heard people wondering about how often Grandma baked bread?
every day.
How many loaves?
4 loaves.
How'd you
They're
have
mean.
Ouch! That's
And that's what she did, and
No wonder
the
she didn't work in
pan
the
almost fit the oven, you know.
field. And their oven,
I
so
never
they
baked,
made
she
their
had
own
to
oven?
study yours.
No, it was in a wood stove oven, in a wood stove.
Did you move that when you moved your sewing machine and stuff?
So that was part of the wagon move, all the equipment.
Hi, you guys.
You use to set up your housekeeping and stuff.
Yeah, we even had an old organ we carried around for
Oh,
almost every move.
Who played the organ?
Nobody.
You just
I don't know
moved it.
where that organ
The
came
air
from.
pump organ.
Yeah, it
one
was
of
a
the
pump organ.
little-
Yeah,
okay, I've
it
seen
was
those.
done pretty good trying to play
But
it.
Lucille, when we moved,
Sis played some.
Pop had it taken apart and made into a suitcase.
Yeah, I know he did. He tore it all to pieces before he moved it the last time.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't know whether he made the suitcase or, he must have.
I guess he did. I
Yeah,
know.
I'm gonna have to go.
she just,
Brought him by here.
she just come from church.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello, hello.
Are y'all telling stories?
Yeah, we're in the story
Oh,
mode.
yes.
We can turn this off a minute.
Uh-huh.
Right.
You know, very many.
Right.
Because we were all together in everything.
Yeah.
And then after, as I told Darlene, I was 13 when they was all starting to be strung out working places.
Yeah.
And then Dennis was married when I was 13. And Needy, I guess I was close to that when she got married. Not long after that, she got married.
But you got some personal things in, like you talked about Mother's
Uh-huh.
personality and
Yeah.
stuff, and that's neat.
What was Aunt Juanita like?
By Grandma.
Like that?
Very calm. I don't, it would take an awful lot to upset her. They did upset her because they agitated her one day.
Just one day they upset her.
That's all I can remember. But when she
probably
was
got
a
in
baby,
trouble.
she got stung. I do remember that. She got, this is by not memory of me, but my mother told me, by a centipede. And she turned just as blue. My mother thought she was dying, and I guess maybe she was. And
Oxygen was shut
Pop
off
was out in
somewhere.
the field working, and she grabbed her up and ran to the field, she said, just as fast as she could go. And maybe the fanning through the air, you don't know what,
Or bouncing her.
yeah, brought her back, and she, by the time she got out there, she was a lot better.
Huh.
But they thought they were going to lose. She was just a little thing. I don't,
It sounded like she stopped breathing.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Yeah, she did.
Yeah, with the
oxygen,
balloon.
yeah. But
Grandma,
needed first aid, and that bouncing business, you know, sort of kept her at lung going again.
Grandma had 9 babies. Did she lose any?
She lost one.
Oh, she
She
did?
lost a little boy between, where was this between? Sis said she knew it was a boy because Sis was old enough to remember.
Oh,
But it
at
was
birth.
still-
She lost it at birth?
Uh-huh.
Oh.
Well, it was premature. It wasn't.
Seems like it was between you and Marvin, but that could have been,
Maybe Marvin and Rita
yeah, there was quite a bit of time there.
right in there, I'd say.
I think you girls got quite an education
Yeah,
Yes,
there it is.
we-
along the way.
We learned
A lot about life. With Grandma getting pregnant, you know,
Yeah.
and having babies.
That was part of the training. Because you all helped.
Right.
So that was part of life. You
That was
learned
part-
by
that's part
just
of life,
knowing and
yeah.
looking and watching and helping.
Uh-huh.
That's how, Grandma wasn't the teacher of health or anything.
But
You
at
just, you were
least
just
they,
living.
she did have a doctor for the delivery, that.
Yeah.
She did?
Really,
You had a midwife?
I think my mother had a doctor most of the time.
Every birth, there was a doctor involved.
I think so. They may have been a midwife, but I never heard of one.
Oh, okay.
Don't know. Because I remember Sis saying something about her birth, and that old doctor didn't write it down.
Okay, now Dad was born in the boxcar. You got to tell me about that story.
Well, Sis says she was, so if she was, I think he was, and that's all I know.
And at what
okay.
point were you living in a boxcar?
They were, I weren't. I wasn't here yet.
Oh, okay.
So see, that's just something Sis told me. And I do think that if she was born, all 3 of them oldest ones was born in Pleasant Valley.
Oh,
That's your
right
mother?
here where we were.
Yeah.
Which is the road we were
Somewhere
on
in a
yesterday.
boxcar. So I think they were all
Where-
born probably in the
where
same way.
And Juanita.
Cowboy was.
We don't know that.
That road,
No,
kind of a Pleasant Valley.
Yeah.
But by all of them being born at Pleasant Valley, and Sis
Yeah.
they
We
were
were on
born in
Pleasant Valley,
boxcar, and I know that was their first. He was working
You
on
may
the
go back to
railroad
that
at the
same
time,
Bob
and
got a
that was
picture.
their housing, you know.
Yeah.
So that's about all I know about that.
In notes that Wilma has from Sis, Pleasant Valley was a wide spot in the road. It had a feed store and a grocery store.
Okay, sort of a,
The way farm communities were, just the 2 essentials. You fed the animals and you fed the people.
Day or night, morning, Pop woke up, he got everybody up, they went to the barn, they got all the horses harnessed, they got everything ready, and they waited for daylight, and they waited, and they waited. Dad said, the way he figures it in his mind, remembering back, Pop must have got up at 2:30 in the morning.
And everybody had to get up.
And I guess he didn't look at a clock, he just thought, it's almost daylight, we'll just go do it. And he said it was forever before, he said he was ready to go back to bed and finally got to go to the field, you know. But that was Pop's nature, get everybody up and get it started.
okay.
Well,
Well,
where's the breakfast come in? I mean,
They probably had breakfast,
I just,
waiting to go to the field, and Dad didn't tell that part because the waiting is what he
Right,
remembered.
right.
Can you
But I-
imagine getting up and feeding a crew like that
But
to
I-
the field? I mean,
Yeah.
You couldn't just have,
Didn't you have a cow to milk?
well, that's when
I
I've
don't
always
know.
heard, you know, you did the chores and you come back and had breakfast, is that right? I mean, is that what we usually hear? But in this situation, how they would do, I wondered, where's this breakfast come in? When did they eat?
I wonder if Mom-
Probably after the chores and before the
before they
Field.
left for the field. I liked it.
Did anyone have cows and milk?
I did.
I did too. Well, and to answer that question, yeah, they went and milked before they eat.
Yeah.
You milk while Mom was cooking biscuits.
I can
Right.
remember having some pigs at one place, and we had guinea hens and a few turkeys at one place.
Now, when you would move, I mean, you're moving every year, you're kind of on the go, so would you take this livestock with you?
Probably we would have eaten it.
Pardon me?
I said, probably we would have eaten
Oh.
them. I don't know.
Remember visiting in Turlock, I was like this when we woke up in the morning by hearing Grandpa and Grandma talking in bed.
I remember about Grandpa and Grandma. Matter of fact, I saw them. They were in Turlock, and he was ill in the hospital when he had his stroke. And we were going to Yosemite, so we stopped by there to visit with him, say hi. And Jason was just a little guy. I was Michelle. Michelle. And there was Grandma sitting by his bedside holding his hand. And I always remember that, how close they were. They were very, very close. And they could always talk, you know, but she just held his hand. And
Like
I
all
mean, it
the
was,
years
you could
together.
tell it was mutual, you know, it wasn't just holding on to him. I mean, they were, I thought that was kind of neat. That's how I remember them.
Lucille was telling earlier that he was more the disciplinarian when it come to actually needing to spank somebody or something. But she said actually he was training them by the work and everything they did.
Oh, yeah,
That was really part of
That's
child
called
training.
discipline.
And so
Yeah.
he was training them, which
Yeah.
is what most of our youth miss anymore, is the work part of training.
That's exactly right.
There's nothing to work at.
There's dignity.
Everything can be done so fast.
And most
in
of
the
the
cities.
most of the commercial jobs won't even hire them till they're 16 now. I mean, that's even changed since we raised our kids. Rodney went
We
to
live in a
work
different
at
world
14
You know.
at the same place he's still
You can't
working.
even discipline the
Park
kids
and
without
rent.
getting, you know, if you're out in public and you're
Reprimanded.
disciplining your
Uh-huh.
kids, they
Child
might get
Protective
turned in.
Services
Right.
will be on you in a minute.
Right.
If you see someone spanking or what looks like might be abuse, you know, you're turned into authorities and, I mean,
You
times
got
have
that
changed.
light on, did you know that? Is that running?
Lucille,
Getting all the conversation.
Lucille, as you were growing up, you were obviously from a religious family. Did you go to church in the home, or did you go to church, or what?
We went to church every time we could find a place that was having it close enough that we could go to. Otherwise, we didn't have transportation, and they didn't hook up the wagon and take us. But my mother would always see to it we got to church somewhere.
So did you have family devotions in the home?
No,
No.
Now, one of Grandma's brothers was a preacher. Wasn't it a ghoul that was a
Uncle
preacher?
Ran was a preacher.
Wasn't Uncle Wilbur too?
I think he did some.
I think so too.
I never heard him, but I did hear him.
There's Earl. Earl Gould.
Earl is Uncle Rand's youngest.
Oh, I know, but I mean,
Is he a
it-
preacher?
Yep, he was an evangelist.
Yeah.
And they were
Yeah.
basically all Pentecostal.
Then they had the, what was the name of that music group they had? Evangeliers or something like Evangeliers.
Oh, Earl?
Yeah,
Oh, well,
they were
I
real
don't know
excellent
that
singers.
about
It was a
him.
great quartet.
Don't know much about Earl.
I don't either. I've never.
Now, his wife was a nurse.
Earl and Hazel Gould.
Yeah.
I remember them telling about the earthquake that happened down there where they were in California.
Or said, I think.
And her having to jump the big cracks in the road to get to the hospital to help out. But that's all that was just hearsay from somebody else.
This might be a silly question, but it came to my mind. Okay, so you're making, Grandma's making clothes out of flour sacks for all the girls.
Well, they were colored. They were printed.
Yes. But you had to haul this machine around every year you moved. Well, what did you do for shoes? Did you hand them down from one to the other? Or
Well,
everybody's shoes.
they usually, my dad always seen to it that he bought us shoes, some kind. As I told Darlene in that thing earlier, And my grandpa, he goes out, he knows my dad has a hard time dressing all of us girls. So he goes out to a sale and he buys these old high-top shoes with heels on them.
Oh,
Some of them string, some of them buttons.
and you couldn't work in the fields in those.
Well, we had to wear them to school, and that was embarrassing because kids didn't wear that kind of shoes.
They said it was floozy shoes.
It was very embarrassing. Sis cut hers off. She cut them off.
Sis was always independent, wasn't she?
She cut them off and fixed them like she wanted them to look, I guess. They looked just as good to her down there as they did up here, better, but the
And you
rest
say
of it-
grandfather, you say your
And you know,
grandfather was that
people
Grandpa
shoes,
Robertson?
and
That's
you
it,
try
okay.
on, and it doesn't tear before you get the
Cole.
right one.
Yeah.
Paul Robertson, James Robertson, is that right? Wow.
We bought shoes
Yeah.
and took them down the street.
He assisted her, he would come over and help her.
Yeah,
You-
Yeah, I can remember one time my dad we were growing
Bought them big,
canes
so that they.
Uh-huh.
for him to make, he thought sorting out of, I guess, but I don't know where he was gonna take it to. I don't ever remember getting the cane made, not when we lived here in Oklahoma.
Mhm.
But Grandpa came, and he was the teacher to teach us kids how to strip.
Nail it on.
Okay.
And, but he went to the field with us. That was the only time I ever remembered my grandpa going to the field with us, but he did.
2 or 3 times.
And taught us how to strip the cane.
And we get
I
2
wonder
years
what
of their boots.
Clarence's life was when he
And
was.
we worked out.
Yeah, it was,
We worked
I'm
out.
sure it was
You
hard,
work out.
We picked up,
because I remember him
Oh.
telling about,
Yeah.
make money.
he
for
moved
clothes.
things
Uh-huh.
a lot.
That was
And
quite
he was a little
quite
man, so I don't know how he picked up this stuff
Had
and
to,
did it
had a
all
lot of
over.
land to
The
make
wagons.
money. My dad,
And he said he'd moved
any money
pianos
that's
for
made off
people,
old
and
plates
moved different
went to his
heavy
sister,
things, and I
his
don't know
brother,
how.
he got a
And
third.
I know,
Plus had to pay taxes.
sometimes he'd have, problems with his back,
Oh, yeah.
and they'd
We
say,
ran a
well,
dairy
he
for
moved
3 years.
heavy things. So
Where
see,
they
I don't
go,
know what
all
he had to
that,
do before.
One of the hiremen
They
took
did.
there.
Doesn't sound like he would have had time to farm and move in.
My dad
I
had
don't know how much
schools
farming they were doing, I don't
for
know
that place.
much about his life.
I just wondered,
Yeah,
for
it
him
would've
to
been-
be so knowledgeable
Family in a barn.
in how he was raising his family, what his life was, might have been.
So, now, that's why,
Oh, it's baked in foil.
some of the family, or, like you're in, Arkansas, living close to Arkansas, and then one of your sisters was in, Wichita, Kansas. You were planted, you were seeds, and you were planted there because you moved around a lot?
Well,
How did that come
I
up?
always said every time we moved, well, he lost somebody,
There you go.
It wasn't quite like that, but
Oh.
anyway, Sis knew Ed before we went, but her and Ed dated before we ever moved to Siloam, or down by Siloam.
Okay.
And that's when they done all their dating back then. And I didn't even know. I said, Sis, when in the world did you write to Ed and decide that you was going to marry him?
Uh-huh.
Because they hadn't saw each other. Now, see, we've lived down there since '38. They married in, I know, in '39, November '39. So I know she hadn't saw him in all that time.
My goodness.
And we was in A there for, I know, probably 6 months. And I went to stay with my grandpa for a while at Disney and help them. And when I come back, Sis was gone, married, left. I didn't even know she was going to get married, and that was what was strange. And I asked her not long before she passed away. I said, "When did you decide to get married, and how did you know you was going to get married?" Because all of a sudden Ed showed up in his car, and I said, "How did he find the place?" And she, Mom told me that he met my dad and somebody else in the wagon and asked them where we lived. And come there and got her, and they got married.
Real courtship.
Yeah, real courtship.
You never dated Ed yourself?
Me?
Mm-hmm. If my memory's right, Sis told Joanne that Ed really wanted you, but you were taken, so he took Sis.
I was 13 years old, and his brother used to come to see me, and Ed told him
So it was Joanne.
that I was too much of a kid
Lucille.
to get to date. So just get out of my life.
Oh, so he might have had his eye on you at one time, and his brother told him he was too young.
Was it the one that married Alma?
No, Leroy.
Now, are you talking Joanne that was here yesterday?
Yeah.
Oh, really? So you've been friends a long time?
Well, you see.
She married one of Ed's brothers.
Oh,
She
that's
married-
right.
Yeah, she was the sister-in-law to Sid.
Okay,
And,
now,
and Lula's oldest daughter married one of Ed's brothers.
Oh, my goodness.
Luna Barker, Grandpa's
Grandma's
sister.
sister.
I was going to say, this goes back before all this got started. Where did Grandpa and Grandma get married? How did they
They
get
got
together?
married in Guthrie. I don't know how they got
Guthrie,
there.
Oklahoma.
So they both lived in this area somewhere.
Oh, somewhere they lived in this area, so they just,
You almost had to marry somebody in the area where you lived because transportation was such a problem. That's why you find a lot of brothers and sisters marrying relatives of each other's.
Yeah. Way back then, it was real prevalent.
Did Aunt Marie choose not to have children, or could she not?
couldn't have
She
children.
could not.
And I wanted to ask Darlene a question. Did you ever hear about Sis and Ed getting a little girl and taking her to the house?
Yes.
And it's like to kill them both.
Mhm.
I mean, they
When they were
grieved
taken,
about that when
they
the
didn't
little
get
girl
her
was
to
took
keep.
away. They
Mhm.
wanted to adopt this little girl,
Oh,
and they had planned to. And
So they never tried after that.
they never tried
Wouldn't want to go
again.
through it
They was
again.
afraid it was too hard. You know, if they got her and they loved her like they did that one, and they would have loved any child, I don't care.
oh, yes.
They just wanted children so bad.
It must have been hard for her to see all of you girls with your family.
Yeah, she used to tease me. I guess she was teasing. She may have meant it. That I wouldn't let Clara spend the night there because she was afraid I'd take her away from her.
Oh.
So anyway.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great story.
it is, that was
A lot of history there.
Wow, yeah. Very good, thank you for taking the time.
It's over at Anderson Edmonds. I guess she stayed there, Anderson Edmonds, didn't she?
Oh, she was there a long time in her latter years.
Oh, yeah, in her old line. And she got to talk to him about Oral Roberts, well, Darlene's mom, about the time she was dying, well, she got this Bible that she got from her mama. And it's I'm noticing it's the one that Darlene has out there and on that dresser.
Uh-huh.
And it's a New Testament commentary by Oral Roberts. She was a big fan of
Sent lots of money to him.
Juanita.
No, Grandma, either.
But Ines got so upset with them after Mom passed away because they kept wanting money,
Yeah,
Mhm.
and her telling them that she was deceased.
yeah.
And Ines just really got upset.
Didn't Mom, Ines take Mom to Oral Roberts
Yes.
once, and they wouldn't let her down to where she needed.
They were very selective
to,
on
who got to go up there to actually
Yeah.
be near
being
him.
prayed for or
And,
something.
yeah, and
And
Grandma
that was
wanted to
very
so
upsetting.
much.
That was
She
very
was
upsetting.
so
And after
disappointed.
that, it made a difference.
Very disappointed. She was not selected.
That would be disappointing.
But another story about my mother. She come to my house one night, she come to visit me, and her eye got really bad. And she asked me to put salt water in it, just mix up some salt water and warm water and put it in her eye. So I did. And I asked her the next morning if she wanted to do it again, and she says, no, there's something else wrong with my eye. I've got to see a doctor. So we took her to I took her to a plain medical doctor, and he sent me to a specialist in Fayetteville. And so got over there, and her eye was leaking fluids, and so he wanted to take the eyeball out right then. And Mom said, no. And I said, no. And he said, she said, I want to go to my doctor in Tulsa. And he said, who is your doctor? And she told him, I don't remember the name, but it was one that Ines had always took her to. And she said, I want to go to my doctor. And so we rushed home with her, and well, he put some kind of a salve or something in her eye. And I know I fixed her a place to lean back and rest in the back seat, and we started to Tulsa with her as fast as we could get her here. And it was dark when we got here, and I'd called ahead and told Ines the situation, and I said, this is an emergency, we've got to do something. And do you know, when we got her to that doctor, that eye had sealed over.
Oh my goodness.
She prayed all the way.
Yeah, that's a miracle, yeah.
And it was a miracle.
That's a miracle.
It never was operated on. It was a bad eye for several days. That doctor kept doctoring it and doctoring it and doctoring it.
Yeah. Well, most of you have probably seen her headstone, but what it is it's about this high.
I haven't seen it.
No, you haven't seen it, and it has Christ standing with the staff. It's a
Will
good
you
shepherd.
take a picture of that?
I will. Is with staff, good shepherd, and the mural is probably about this high, and it has a 23rd Psalm, and it's just very depictive of her. Yeah, I'll take a picture for you. Get it.
Was that about the time she couldn't fly home when Marvin, no, it was when Dennis died, I guess?
I
She
thought
couldn't
she
go
was
to the
there.
funeral?
No, she
No, she
didn't
wasn't.
go to them.
No.
I thought it was because the doctor said that she shouldn't fly with her bad eye.
He was gone in '76, and how much longer did she live with that in the early '80s?
86. She passed away. Wasn't it?
I don't remember. That's why I have all those notes, but I don't have them right in front of me.
I think you've done very well what you come up with here.
Well, I know she passed away on Wilm's birthday. She won't ever forget that.
You all right? You walk?
I thought it was like in the very early '80s.
It may have been.
81,
It may have been,
82,
honey. It may have been.
I'm
Because
This
I'm
is-
like Wilma. After I said it, I thought, no, she died on the 26th, probably is where I got the
When
6th.
she got
I,
the
I wouldn't.
I associated where we lived when I heard
I
about
don't know what that means. That's when
And I
she
think
died.
it
She
might
got
have been
it.
early.
She just got
I
it.
want to say 81 now.
I kind of think,
This here Bible
April
says,
26th, 81.
I think so.
uh,
Pardon?
this Bible has 1981, that when 180 got
She
this
died
Bible.
April 26th, '81.
81.
right.
Yeah, after I said that, I thought, no, that probably isn't right
Yeah.
because I got the 6th mixed up with the
Right.
26th. 81.
Yeah. Should we be going?
I'm really good.
Nothing.
Sure lives across the road
So
from
they
me, and
actually
lives
live in
down just a little way from me.
Well, some of the Cherokees.
What?
It doesn't tell.